In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on the darkest corners of death row. March 2025 saw the state carry out a chilling wave of executions, each one marking the final chapter in stories soaked with blood, betrayal, and unimaginable violence. These are the final moments of the most dangerous killers and the justice that awaited them. Brad Keith Sigmon, March 7, 2025. Brad Keith Sigmon became the first person in South Carolina to be executed by firing squad. But what kind of crime leads to a death so brutal, so rare? To answer that, we go back to April 27, 2001. By alcohol, cocaine, and obsession, Brad stormed into the home of his ex-girlfriend's parents, David and Gladys Lark. In his hands, a baseball bat. In his heart, pure rage. He crushed their skulls in a savage, merciless attack. Blood painted the walls. The couple never had a chance. But Brad wasn't done. He grabbed a handgun and waited for his ex, Rebecca Barbara, to return. When she did, he forced her into her car at gunpoint. But as he drove, she jumped, risking her life to escape. Brad was fired. He missed. Then he vanished. A manhunt began. 11 days later, he was caught in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. He confessed, but there would be no sympathy. In 2002, a jury saw through every excuse. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was planned, predatory, and evil. He was sentenced to death. For 23 years, Brad clung to appeal after appeal, each one denied. His last hope? The U.S. Supreme Court. They rejected him in 2021. March 7th, 2025. 67-year-old Brad Sigmon faced a concrete wall, hooded and strapped to a chair. 3 rifles aimed at 6:08 p.m. They fired. He was dead. And his final statement: "I want my closing statement to be one of love, a calling to my fellow Christians to help us end the death penalty." But the nation wouldn't have long to process what happened, because less than 2 weeks later, Louisiana made history. Jesse Dean Hoffman. On March 18, 2025. Jesse Hoffman faced death, but not by needle, not by bullet. This time, a mask filled with invisible nitrogen gas. He was the first in Louisiana, and only the 5th in U.S. history, to be executed this way. And the story behind his crime? It was Thanksgiving week, 1996. Mary Molly Elliott, 28, married an advertising executive, left work in downtown New Orleans, and headed home. She never made it. In a dimly lit parking garage, 18-year-old Jesse Hoffman, disguised in a valet jacket, was waiting. He pulled a gun, forced her into her oar. At a nearby ATM, he made her withdraw cash, surveillance cameras capturing the dread in her eyes. But the worst was still to come. Jesse drove Molly 50 miles into the woods, deep into the isolation of Pearl River. There, on a rotting dock in the cold night, he stripped her, raped her, and forced her to kneel. Then he shot her in the head. She lay there, lifeless and naked. Then her belongings were dumped like trash. But the clues he left behind were too sloppy to ignore. ATM receipts, surveillance footage, and that valet jacket? It led straight to him. He was arrested, lied, then confessed. In 1998, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and theft. The death sentence came fast. But the execution took 27 years. Jesse fought back, filing appeals citing PTSD, Buddhist beliefs, and the cruelty of nitrogen hypoxia. But it was all denied. On March 18, 2025, at 6:21 p.m., strapped into a chair in Angola prison, an industrial mask was sealed over his face. Then the gas flowed. He offered no final words. He had no final meal. At 6:50 p.m., death finally caught up to him. But not every inmate fears execution. The next one? He welcomed it. Aaron Brian Gunches. On March 19, 2025, Aaron Brian Gunches was executed by lethal injection at Arizona State Prison. Back in November 2002, Gunches killed Ted Price, the ex-husband of his girlfriend, Catherine Letcher. After a heated fight between Ted and Catherine, Aaron decided to handle it. He shoved Ted into a car and claimed he'd put him on a bus. Instead, he drove into the Arizona desert. Off the Beeline Highway, Ted tried to run. Aaron opened fire. 4 shots. The last one fatal. Then he tossed Ted's belongings into a dumpster and vanished. But he didn't stay hidden for long. In January 2003, a state trooper pulled him over. Aaron shot him twice and fled. The manhunt ended with Aaron hiding in a haystack in Wendon, Arizona. Caught. And this time, there'd be no escape. In 2004, he pleaded guilty, but it was delayed. Gunches begged for execution. "I want justice for the victim's family," he said. Then he changed his mind. After watching botched executions in Arizona, ones that left inmates gasping and burning, he called the process torture. The governor paused all executions. Ironically, his warrant expired. But in 2025, the victim's family kept pushing, and Gunches gave up fighting. On March 19, 2025, at age 53, the case of Aaron Gunches finally came to its end. No last words. Justice was served. But something darker was brewing. Wendell Arden Gyram March, 20th, 2025. Oklahoma carried out one of the most anticipated executions in its history. Wendell Gyram, after 19 years on death row, was finally put to death by lethal injection. But before the gurney came a trail of terror. On November 2nd, 2005, Wendell left Arkansas in a white Chevy truck. Somewhere along the highway, he picked up a hitchhiker, Jesse Johns, a drifter with a thirst for danger. They drank whiskey, talked cash, and hatched a plan of robbery. They bought gloves, loaded Wendell's .40 Ford, and drove deep into the back roads of Blaine County, Oklahoma. They found a quiet home. Inside, Lauren Kopp, her 2 baby girls, and her friend Amber Matthews. Wendell knocked, smiling. "Is your husband home?" Amber said no. That's when the monster showed himself. He opened fire, glass exploding, children screaming. He shot Lauren in the hand and hip. She begged him to stop. He laughed, pressed the barrel to her head, and fired again. She didn't die. Not yet. Amber ran with the baby. He shot her too. Bleeding, Lauren crawled to the garage, then the road. A trucker stopped. Her words, "My friend and my kids are dead." But miraculously, the baby survived. But poor Amber didn't. Wendell and Jesse fled on a stolen ATV. It ran out of gas. They hitched a ride, straight into the hands of the law. Wendell was found crouched in a rock pile, pistol still warm, gloves soaked in blood. He was sentenced to death. Twice. For 19 years, he tried to dodge justice. But on March 20th, 2025, it caught up to him. His final words, "I apologize to all of you that I've hurt." At 10:13 a.m., the needle was pushed in. Wendell was dead, but the sun hadn't even set when Florida prepared its execution. Edward Thomas James. On March 20th, 2025. After 3 decades on death row, Edward Thomas James met his end in Florida. But what did he do? It was almost too horrific to believe. Eddie was born in 1961, raised in chaos, and introduced to drugs by his father. By his 30s, he was spiraling, addicted, jobless, and homeless. That's when Betty Dick, a kind-hearted woman in Castleberry, gave him a chance. She took him in, fed him, trusted him. On September 19, 1993, Eddie came home after a night of drinking and 10 tabs of LSD. The house was quiet. 4 children were asleep. He strangled 8-year-old Toni Niner, assaulted her, stuffed her lifeless body behind the bed. He then bashed Betty with a candlestick as she screamed, "Why, Eddie? Why?" He stabbed her again and again until she was lifeless. 9-year-old Wendy saw it all. He tied her up, locked her in the bathroom. Then he calmly showered. His blood soaked the house. Eddie stole Betty's car and disappeared. 3 weeks later, America's Most Wanted led to his arrest in California. In custody, he confessed, on tape. No remorse, no shame. In 1995, he was sentenced to death. For 30 years, he fought the inevitable. On March 20th, 2025, at 8:15 p.m., Edward Thomas James was finally met with execution. He had no visitors, no final statement. But for the family, silence was a form of justice. As Betty's daughter said, "He had power over us for 31 years. That power ends now." 5 men faced the end. One story won't leave your mind. Which was it? Share your thoughts in the comments down below.